Welcome to the Caribbean Edge. My name is Dawn Wilson. I'm your host this evening as we discuss protecting women and children and raising this issue of awareness today. I wanted to start with a quote that I read on Facebook just for the temperature we're in today's world. And it says, listen more often to the bees and to the trees. There's a new world coming. If you are still, you can hear it breathe. And that is just the beginning. Hello, Mama. How are you doing, George? Breathing, Mama. And that is just the beginning. And that is one of our favorite authors, storyteller, Dr. Amina Blackwood Meeks, who is part of the Caribbean Edge Kids family and a huge supporter of children in the world. So we thank her for that. Welcome to the Caribbean Edge as we welcome all our guests this evening to talk about this very important topic, protecting our women and children. I want to welcome Mr. Noel Cunningham to the forum. Hi, Noel, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good, I'm good.
Good, and I'm doing fabulous. Thank you for asking. So tell us about you, Noel.
Alrighty, so I'm a chef all the way from Kingston, Jamaica, but I'm based here in Toronto, Canada. Now for the past, 7 years going on, I'm a cookbook author. I recently opened my restaurant here in Toronto. Yes, in the middle of a pandemic, I opened a restaurant. And pretty much that's what I do. I'm also a food writer. You know, I'm also contribute to the Jamaica Gleaner, Toronto Caribbean newspaper, and yeah, just about that.
Well, thank you. So glad to have you, especially as a man on the panel, to have this topic, very important for us.
Yeah.
And I want to welcome Ms. Kellie Magnus, who has joined us on the Caribbean Edge Kids, and she's an author as well, doing wonderful and amazing work in Jamaica. Hi, Kellie. Welcome back to our forum.
Hi, Dawn. Thank you for having me again, this time with another hat.
Absolutely. So, Kellie, I want you to tell us about all the work you're doing in Jamaica with the children.
Sure. Yeah. Well, as you said, I write for children. That is my passion. But I also work on programs for children and young people. And currently, I'm the country lead for an NGO called Fight for Peace that works in several countries around the world on preventing youth violence. And in Jamaica, we run a program called Up Unity and Peace, which brings together about 40 different local organizations to deliver programs for young people, their parents, and organizations that work with young people in communities that have high levels of violence. And this work that I've been doing for about 5 years. And so this topic is really important to me. And I'm also joined tonight by my colleague, Michelle Harrison, who is a psychologist with Fight for Peace here in Jamaica and works with our children and families as well.
Thank you. A great introduction from Michelle as well. Thank you both for what you're doing in our community with our children. So hi, Michelle.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're so welcome. So tell us what's so rewarding about the work you're doing with the children.
This is only an hour show, right? To be honest, I'm always teased how I look like I'm a 12-year-old. And it's because working with children just gives you this energy, this life that you can't get anywhere else. You know, no matter what's going on, you talk to a young person, you hear their experiences, you share their successes, and you just feel so fulfilled. So for me, what is so rewarding is seeing these young people just thrive, no matter what they're facing, just experiencing success.
Thank you. And I'm sure that's why you do what you do. I work with the elderly as well, and the same rewarding feeling you get. And from the kids show that we do, it's just rewarding knowing that we're giving back and setting the kids up for success. So thank you again for being here and for what you do. Very important for us. And we have joining us as well, Mr. Anthony Cruz.
Hey,
hi, Anthony, welcome.
Nice having me. Well, my right name is Rowan Smith, aka Anthony Cruz. I'm a singer-songwriter, a producer also, and when I was introduced to this forum, you know, and I kind of like the topic of what you guys are about to discuss. So I was very elated to be here. So thank you for having me.
So welcome. And look at that big, broad smile that him bring to the panel. And last but not least, we have Shauna from Down to Earth Production. Hi, Miss Shauna.
Hello, everyone. Hey, John. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So tell us what you're up to. You do a lot of great work in Jamaica.
Not only Jamaica, I wouldn't narrow it down to Jamaica. Mostly in Africa. I'm the CEO of Down to Earth Productions. The only music agency here in the Caribbean that represent the big names like Wizkid, Yemi Alade, Pata Rankin, Busi from South Africa, Bodhisattva from Central African Republic, and the list could goes on. We don't have much time. I'm also a music business, and Freddie McGregor. How could I forget Freddie McGregor? Yes, I represent Freddie McGregor as a publicist, and I'm also a music business consultant and an A&R executive.
I know, right? Well, we are thankful that you've all taken time out of your busy schedule to join us tonight. And I want to just start with a question at hand is abuse. You know, let's talk about it as far as the perspective of women. Women are being beaten around the world by their spouses. And that's not to belittle the fact or exclude the fact that men are also abused by their fathers, or also at times women as well. But specifically tonight, we want to address the fact that because it's more dominantly happening with women and their children. And I don't know too many people that have not been personally impacted by abuse, either as a child or as a wife or a girlfriend. So let me just start asking you as a panel, and anyone is free to speak on it, is what is your personal experience, if you want to disclose that, with abuse, whether it's as a child or as an adult, coaching or having a friend that has gone through it? Okay, so no one on my panel has that experience. I'm going to start talking to just shed some light on it. You know, I grew up in a household where I had an abusive father. And you can never tell looking at me now as a woman, a professional. And I can tell you as a child, you grow up in fear. The fear that you don't know if you have another day to live. The fear that you don't know what's going to set your parent off, which is the person that's here to protect you. In every way possible. So not only did he beat me as his daughter, but he also beat his girlfriend. And so you live with that fear every day. If she's home late, she's getting beaten. And that's the household I grew up with. I decided at a young age, because I despised that behavior for so long, that I would never ever beat my kids. That was not the lifestyle that I wanted. So I am thankful today that I can say I broke that cycle with my kids. My kids don't get beaten. They don't deserve it. And it's not to say they don't do anything wrong, but my kids have never done anything for me to put that fear into them. And so I can tell you from a child's perspective what it's like to watch someone get beaten and you yourself being beaten to a point where, and I'll share this, and I've shared it publicly before, my dad beat me with a tractor belt. And a tractor belt has little squares and grooves in it. And I remember his girlfriend had to sit there and pull the t-shirt with the blood and the skin and the flesh out of my back to get the t-shirt out of my back. That is child abuse. And that's what our children go through. And they become adults at one point. So that's what I mean by, if anyone on this panel has personal experience, please feel free to share it so we can shed light on what child abuse looks like. I watched a video where someone was beating a child with a machete. and people were defending this woman. And I don't know how that kid survived that beating. And that was on social media for a long time, circulating. And children don't need that. Children need to be protected. So I'm going to start with Kellie and Michelle, and just tell us, based on the kids you're working
first of all, Dawn, just thank you so much for sharing that, because I think that's one of the hurdles, right? People don't like to talk about it. And so there is pressure on people who experience abuse to act as though it's normal, to act, you're not allowed to vocalize that it hurt. You're not allowed to vocalize that this is happening. And that, you know, causes the cycle to continue, prevents people from seeking help. So I think making spaces for these conversations is an important step. That was not my personal experience. The older I get, the more I realize how lucky I was to grow up in a family that was not wealthy, but that was just rich in love. I had my father in particular just did not believe in putting his hands on children and treated his children. He thought he could reason with you. I mean, there are times, and as a child, I would just be like, can I just get the beating? You know, you're watching your neighbors' kids getting beaten, and you're just like, Jesus. Because he would just want to talk things through with you and try to understand, like, why did you do this thing that you've done? And explain that you had disappointed him. And that was just his way of dealing with things. And you know, it's something that now I realize is, you know, he was way ahead of his time in terms of like his own view on that. Michelle can tell you better than I the horrific stories that we often have to hear about things that young people in the communities we work in have experienced, and the difficulty involved in getting them to trust adults enough to come forward and share their stories so that help can be provided to them. But as I said, I think part of it is just continuing to make these conversations open and have people, you know, encouraged to share their stories.
Absolutely. And we live in such a climate, especially in the Caribbean, of shame. We're ashamed to have the conversation, whether it's about someone being raped, whether it's about the child abuse. I mean, in my situation, all my neighbors knew, but they all feared my dad anyway. There was no neighbors to intervene. There was no community. The rest of the family feared him too, so they didn't intervene. My brother and I ran away several times to my grandma's house. Fortunately, we had, you know, somewhere to go, but so many kids don't have anywhere to go. So Michelle, if you could, yeah, Shauna?
Dawn, question. Because as well, fortunately, as Kellie said, you know, she never have to experience that. You know, neither do I. You know, I grew up in a loving home. Lucky for me. My mother had that experience growing with her aunt being, you know, abused, you know, in terms of serious beating with serious sticks and all that of stuff, you know. But luckily, I have one of the most lovely mother, you know, who didn't say, okay, I'm going to retaliate and beat my kids. I got beaten one time, I must say, from my mom, and it was because I didn't want to go to school. So, and she didn't even want to do it. But anyway, how did you heal? Because I know these process as a kid, I know many kids who have been abused don't heal, and they bring it over into their adult life. We can see example people like a Chris Brown, you know, who actually, you know, brought up in an environment where his mother been abused, and you see how that leads off to the abuse with Rihanna, you know, and not only Rihanna but other women. But how did you heal to not bring that childhood, you know, I would call it nightmare, over into your personal life?
I think I developed personally somewhat of a defense mechanism to be at peace with myself and just know what I wanted out of my life and not what my dad did. I knew one time that I would at some point grow up and have my own life. And I just think by the grace of God, I got through it. I thank him every day for that. I also believe that I mentally blocked a lot of it out as a child because you don't talk about it, you don't think about it. But then after I left home, I had a great life. I worked for Sandals Royal Caribbean Hotel and I was on my own. And so just my personality probably didn't allow me to keep those negative feelings in. But it's not until recently, since I had this show, I mean, my friends have known about it, that I've become public to speak about it, because there's never been a reason to really talk about it. But thankfully, I made my choices on what I wanted for my own kids. I can say, you know, friends that I know grew up being beaten. They beat their kids. It's like it carries on. So it's like a choice. And I think more people choose to carry it on than those that choose not to. So I want to talk to Michelle a little bit about some of the kids you work with, Michelle, and the examples that you can bring to the table of what kids are going through and their ages, if you can tell us as well.
Sure. Again, I just want to echo Kellie's sentiment about thank you for sharing, because one of the hardest things about working with young people who experience abuse is that they often suffer in silence. And it's because they may tell an adult, and because it's normalized, the adult does nothing. And so the young people feel, well, what's the point of speaking out? Because I guess it's what I am supposed to deal with. The program caters to young people between the ages of 7 and 29. I typically work with a younger age group. So I'm typically with a 7-year-olds till about 13, 14. And those who I have had to advocate for because of the abuse they endure, the biggest takeaway is that they feel so relieved, not only that they had the space to share it, but that an adult kind of leapt into action. So they are scared to share it. You know, there's nervousness. They kind of look around in case anybody is listening to them, and they kind of test you. It's almost like they want to gauge, all right, is she really here for me? Does she mean what she says when she's here to support? And one of the key things I've learned in helping a child overcome abuse is supporting them every step of the way. So there are going to be days they're just angry and they may lash out at you. You have to realize it's not about you. It's just they have finally gotten the opportunity to let it out, because a lot of them bottle it up. So it's really just listening, not to get the details like when did it happen, how often, but more to just let them know you're not alone. I hear you, and I'm here to support you through it, and really advocating for them. So helping them to kind of amplify their voices.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm so glad you're there for these children and that they do have an outlet. A lot of kids don't have an outlet or choose to go to an outlet. I remember going from school to home. That was it, school to home. So you don't have a chance to go anywhere else to get help. So yeah, so Noel,
Yeah.
you have something on your mind. Tell us what you're
Well,
thinking.
I'm like Kelly. Well, for me, I grew up in a home where I've never received beaten. Like really, I've never grew up in a home where we got abused. Like my mom just never ever liked to beat, and I never grew up with my dad. So I was with my stepdad, and of course, you know, he loved me to the max. So he never really ate. But the thing is, like for my mom, like having conversation with her, she went through a lot with her mother, and her abuse was more of verbal. So I was actually looking at the quote where it says, "Sticks and stone may break my bones, but words will never break me," which is a lie, because a lot of people might not get physical abuse, but they get verbal abuse, and this is sometimes something that lives with you. So maybe, you know, like Shauna, who got it one time and she maybe not really remember, she's not sure, but the words is something that really lives within you. And when that break like, oh, you're not coming out to nothing. Yeah, this, you have that. And this kind of abuse is really a big one. But then I think, like for me, in my house, so my mom realized what she went through with her mom. So she never tried to bring that over to us, which I'm happy for, you know, so. Yeah.
Yeah. So your mom broke the cycle. And you mentioned something very critical is that verbal abuse.
Yeah.
And that's what intimidates us. We can't say anything, even though you're living it every day.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine for women that their partners are beating on them. And a lot of people will say, and it may sound ridiculous, why don't you just leave? It's not that easy to just leave. You know, there's the financial aspect of it. Where is this person going to go? They're so fearful and intimidated. And we've seen a lot of videos being circulated on our children, especially in Jamaica, young girls, where men who are significantly older are dating these young girls, and you know, they're being taken advantage of. They're being killed. We've seen that happen because these young girls at some point reject them. So Anthony, are you familiar with any of that, and what's your thoughts, feedback?
Well, me as a country youth grew up in the country still. Me used to get beat, but not to the extent of being abused, you know. One lick here and there, you know, as far and as a form of discipline, I would say. But as far as like abuse, I've seen so many people around and get abused both verbally and physically, you know. And one of the worst I've experienced is losing my daughter and her mother to abuse, you know. And there were so many signs where she should have taken heed, and even to the point where her brothers, you know, were warning her, you know, and it led to her death and the death of my daughter, you know. And it's something really that I have to live with for the rest of my life, you know. But as I try to move forward, what I do is, you know, I have a son, you know. I try to teach him, you know, to respect women, not to hit women, you know, careful how you talk to women, you know, because he has another sister by his mother's side, you know, and they're always fighting. So I'm always, you know, trying to lecture him as far as how him treat him sister and all of them things there, you know. So it's just one thing I really don't like about the whole beating situation is that people, especially in Jamaica, make it seem like it's a part of your culture. You know, it's a part of your culture to, you know, beat your kid. But there are other ways where you can discipline your children, you know, without have to beat them. And would even bother talk about man beating woman, because that's like a totally what do call it now? That's a no-no, totally, you know, putting your hand on a female on a whole. So yeah, that's my little journey as far as, you know, abuse physically and verbally, you know.
And first and foremost, I'm so sorry you lost your daughter and her mom as well. I'm not sure if you're able to, you know, tell us what you would do to what would you do differently, knowing what you know now and the consequences of it. Like, are you able to explain any details on it?
Well, nobody knows what the future brings, you know. Nobody knows what's going to happen. But as I said before, my advice is take heed and look out for the what I call the signs. Look out for the signs, because once a person hit you one time, more than likely it will happen again, you know. And it has, we have seen it led to, you know, girls being killed, women being killed, you know, all of that stuff. So as far as me, if there's anything I could do about it, I mean, as I said, nobody don't know what tomorrow brings, and nobody don't know what the next step is going to be. But taking precaution, you know, I would say, and take heed of the signs, and once you see the signs, you know, so it's time to exit, you know.
And
Yeah.
I'm kind of happy you said that Anthony, because I remember one time I was like small, my stepdad, raised his hand at my mom, and she used like this chalk figurine, back in the days, and she knocked him out like cold with it. And she was like, no, man, put them on for me. So she right there and then, she set the bar, and that never happened again. And that's something I always tell people. And one, some might say, oh, you're blaming the victim, but I always believe that the physical abuse starts with verbal. And there are some signs, and you as a woman supposed to set your bar, set your example, what you will tolerate and what you will not tolerate. Nobody just start off and being abusive. So that's just my thing is look for the signs and just raise your bar, set your standard, and
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that about, raising your standards and setting the bar, but it doesn't always happen because somehow as women, we're convinced to say, give me another chance, baby, and you stay in the situation. So like we said, it's not always easy to walk away. But what are we doing as a community or as a world or as a country to change the behavior of the abuser himself? And to me, a lot of that starts with our children, right? So a lot of the abusers, the laws need to change and adjust and lock them up. A lot, I think a lot of times we're reacting to the situation after the fact versus being proactive. We need to protect our women.
Dawn?
Mm-hmm.
What about, as Anthony mentioned and the other gentleman mentioned about the signs, many women see the signs, the physical abuse, the verbal abuse, and they will say, oh yes, he loves me. So even when you go to the station and you report the matter and somebody's just saying, oh, he loves me, and you keep having, what about those people with the repeat behavior, keep saying he loves me until when somebody dies?
Yeah.
Anthony made the point about the need for culture shift and I think having conversations like this is a big part of it, just having more open conversations about what love is supposed to look like, what love is supposed to feel like, and changing those norms that Shauna is talking about. I think, one of the very few positive things that I see coming out of this COVID pandemic is that there's much more openness about conversations around mental health and an encouragement of people to seek support. And I think that's a key part of the solution to all of these very tangled issues. Emotionally healthy people do not beat other people, male or female.
Absolutely.
And I think the more conversations we have about recognizing your emotions, ventilating your emotions, seeking support when you need support, whether you're male or female, whatever that support might look like, the more honest and open we get about dealing with mental health issues, the better a chance we have at addressing issues of violence across the board. Violence against women and children, yes, but violence in general. I think Jamaica has a problem with violence in general, in addition to our violence against women and children problem. And I think core to addressing all of those issues is a greater understanding of mental health issues and greater acceptance towards seeking support.
100% agree with that, Kellie. And
I think also, oh, sorry, Dawn.
No, go ahead, Michelle.
Oh, I was just, as everyone was talking, I'm reminded that we also have to be aware of the definition of abuse. So let's take us as school children. Everybody just accepted you had to get a nickname. And usually your nickname was related to a deficit, a weakness, or something you might not have been comfortable with. A lot of persons don't realize that simply giving someone a nickname can actually begin a slow process of breaking them down. But culture says, oh, a nickname is nothing. You mustn't take it on. But we have to be mindful of the language we use. And is the language we're using building someone up or actually tearing them down? And a lot of people get on children who do respond to the nickname being like, you're too sensitive. You need to get a thicker skin. But the truth is, when you look on the nickname, it's not pretty eye girl. It's something like big head boy.
Or black boy.
or black boy or blackie.
Yeah.
It's something that's meant
Yeah.
to be negative. And even starting from then, telling children this is something you have to accept. Unfortunately, as the years continue and as they get older, it's almost like they become numb to those slight aggressions, and it just builds up and builds up until it becomes normalized. Another thing is that, as Kellie said, we have to acknowledge that when we are overwhelmed, when you're overwhelmed, when you have strong emotions, oftentimes you release it in a negative way. And it may be you don't have the proper coping strategy. So one thing we try to let our young people know is that, listen, even if it's not me, even if it's not, we call everybody auntie and uncle. If it's not Auntie Kellie, if it's not Uncle John, you need to find an adult you feel comfortable with. So when you need help, you raise your hand, but you have to start early, because when you get to adulthood, it's almost like the shame overtakes you. So you have to start the conversations as early as possible. So as Anthony is saying, he talks to his son, this is not what you should do. This is how you should treat a woman. Start early, plant the seed, because when it reaches to adulthood, you have a forest that is a lot more difficult to prune.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, these stuff really start from the home. And we have a culture in Jamaica where most home is just the mom. The dads are not there. So just like Anthony is present in his kid's life and he can train his son in a way. For me, I had my stepdad who, of course, I'm having big bicycle, I'm a small bicycle, and he teach me certain stuff. And there are certain values and attitude that I got from a young age. And we find that that's missing from the kids. It's all broken home. And it's like house of pain. And you find that there's no foundation. Then for some home, they just depend on the school to do this for the kids. Then there's nothing in the home to nourish and build on that. Then you find that as a baby, a boy, you drop, you fall, something happened. You're not supposed to cry. You're coming like girl if you cry, stuff like that. So you grow now to keep all your anger, all your this, because if you cry, you're coming like girl. So when you grow up now, it's like you bend the tree a certain way. So when you grow up now, it's hard for you to shift the trees. It's very hard, and everyone mental health is different to shift, So that's a problem too. The root, that's a root, really.
Right. So Kellie mentioned something that I want to go back to as well about, with COVID-19 and more focus and awareness on mental health. But we also know with COVID-19, more people are home. And you're home with that abuser. You're home with that parent that you are living in fear of. The husband, the boyfriend, you're living in fear of. So we are seeing some of that play out in real life. And people have been talking about it with COVID and kids being home, what's next? And something, Michelle, thanks for raising that, because we do need to be aware of the names that we are labeling our children at a young age, and that is demeaning our children. And Noel, for you as well, yeah. we're talking about parenting, right? So if and I'm not going to say, there's just a woman in the house raising the kids, because it goes across the board, because sometimes you could have both parents in the home and it's still not a stable home. Yeah. And I know you're generalizing, so what are the parents' responsibility in the home? Because some of those same moms are selling out their daughters to older men for their own financial gain. We've seen that in social media as well. So what is the mom and dad's role supposed to look like in a kid's life so that they end up feeling safe and comfortable in their home?
Well, that's missing too. So there are lots of factors that affect, say, the abuse and what's happening now in terms of the violence against, women. And that's why you find that sometimes these young girls would turn to older men, because they get some form of comfort and love that what they miss from home, they can get elsewhere. And sometimes because of financial reason, they will end up with these older men. So if we want to attack this, we can't attack it from the country point of view like this. We got to attack it from different, like economical, from the family structure, stuff like that, from a community point of view, to find out, the root, dig to the root of the problem. Because I know we have so much trauma that's going over on family and the generation. It's just trauma upon trauma, house of pain. And if you should interview these people and find out, like what's happening, then you can hear some stories and realize so much brokenness, and it's just spilling over, honestly.
But do we feel like because you lived a broken life that you should repeat that behavior or continue?
Not everyone is strong to really get over certain things. Like for you, you are strong because you decided at a young age that, look, I'm not going to carry over this. Like, for example, two of my favorite, we have Whitney Houston, who, of course, went with substance abuse and stuff like that, and it took her home. Then we have Whitney, Tina Turner, who was physically abused by Ike and what she went through, and she lose her teeth and all these stuff. But yet still she stepped away from the limelight. She's now living her life, and she walked away. She didn't let her past get the best of her. So everyone is just different, and the abuse is just different for all of us.
Right, and I agree that we're all different. I just think that at some point we are accountable for our behavior.
Not easy, yeah. Because like for DMX, his mom never say I love you before. And that spill over on his relationship, right? And even Wendy Williams was saying that, at some point, as you're saying, you have to be accountable as an adult. But not everyone is strong. Not everyone is strong.
I think one of the things that we believe strongly in, Don, is just making sure that there's a network of services available for people who need them, because there is no one size fit all solution for any of these issues. And as Noel is saying, you cannot tell which solution is going to work for which person at which moment. And so I think how we approach it in the spaces where we work is to make sure that there's like a network of protective factors available for young people, for their parents, for the organizations that work with them, so that there is a greater chance of something working, because we don't know what is going to trigger. I mean, we it's a good thing that Michelle is small, because we can put her in the sports sessions. But before COVID, when we had sports, we hired our psychologists and social workers in the sports sessions with the young people, because it turns out that young people don't want to go to a psychologist with a big office that says psychologist on the door, where they immediately feel labeled like something is wrong with them. So we have our psychologists in the sessions with them, so you just come to know this person as an adult who you can trust, who's on your side. We don't know whether it's session 2 or session 12 or session 20 where that person is now going to be at the level of trust where they can tell the psychologist what's going on. We don't know. That we've had cases where it's not the psychologist who the young person goes to first, it's the sports coach, right? Because there's something about being in regular contact with this adult who trusts you. You're engaging in an activity that is bringing out something that, bringing out the best in you that you feel like you're good at. There's something in that relationship that's very empowering, right? So our model is to try to make sure that there is this network of available services, and that all the adults offering those services know that you have one job. Your job is to help this young person realize their potential. That is your one job. Whether you're like me, who's just dropping into the session every once in a while, or you're like Michelle, who's there every day, or you're the taekwondo coach, or you're the English teacher, you got one job. And I think that kind of a networked approach is what we need more of, so that we have organizations doing what they're each good at, but working together and referring people across services so that it all adds up to a greater good.
It's very obvious Kellie and I work for the same organization, because she led into my point. Because one of the things is, Noel, so you said not everything is strong, but I found it interesting you use Whitney Houston and Tina Turner.
Yeah.
I'm too young to remember Tina Turner being abused, but I remember watching the movie. Yeah. For her, her healing came from her the Buddhist, I think it was Buddhist or Hindu, right? Like she clung to that. As Kellie said, every young person is going to be different. I can share an experience where there's a young person who I've gotten very close to, but believe me, for 1 entire year, I was tested. They would come into the session, only side eye, never spoke to me at all. And when I say I was being tested, for that young person, they needed to know she really means she's going to be there. So even whenever the cussing, I got so much cussing off, but I never said, fine, cuss me off, let me walk away. You have to have the consistency. And as Kellie said, you have to build that trust. Sadly, for many persons in the situation of abuse, young people, women, even men, they kind of get stuck where they don't have even one person who is going to be there that they can trust, who is really going to have their back. And another thing, there is a challenge with accessing support. There's a real challenge. So even with young people, thank God our program provides support, because navigating some of these systems takes a lot of time, which means you have to miss work, which means you miss a paycheck, which means you can't put food on the table. And so it just contributes to the cycle.
Yeah.
So no matter who it is, the abuser or the victim, there has to be access to support to deal with the root cause. No matter what that support is, for some young people, they respond better to using sports. So you use the lessons they learn in sports and translate it to real life, so to school. For others, it's a faith. They may have deep faith. You have to lean on that. But the key is you have to give them access to the support, and you have to be consistent. Don't show up today and then don't show up tomorrow.
You have some persons who also have support, and they have persons that they can talk to. But sometimes the abuse is so far, they become in a dark place where they just can't be safe. Trust me. They become in a place where when they get to themselves alone or the me time, voices, there are things like you're no good, you're nothing, you're this. And they just, I want to say, but they just talk to the person, they don't want nothing out of life, them can't, but they reach a stage where, and then for us in Jamaica, you know, we just start to acknowledge mental health as well, because first of all, we say people mad. And you know, we don't have certain institutions set up, certain stuff set up, and we're getting there. Just they have a home now where ladies can go. I grew up in a garrison and see female, you know, get beat up by them man and thing. When the police them come, them leave and say, oh, a domestic whatever abuse, and then gone. Or you call the station, them not care because I just the norm. Or so we're moving away slowly, and it's so sad that it has to take life for change to be coming. But the change is coming though.
Well, I know we're talking a lot about the children and working with children. So what about the adults for today's world, the men that are beating women, the friends that stand by and watch it and it becomes a joke? Yeah, man, me get her 2 lick last night, she did a yard. I mean, isn't that a personal choice for people to change? I remember when I was an adult and finally able to have a conversation with my dad, he said to me, girl, you know, experienced nothing. You should know what I went through with your grandmother. That is not a reason to bring your kids to almost death. You know,
I think it's such a huge point, John, and I was going to say something to Anthony earlier that relates to this. I think wanted to you know, he talked about talking to his son about protecting women, and I think that's important. But I think it's also important to talk to boys and girls, men and women, about controlling yourself and controlling your physical aggression. It's one of the reasons that we use combat sports. So we're a sport for development organization, and people often ask us, why are you teaching kids to fight? How do you fight for peace? But one of the reasons that we do use combat sports is that learning to control your physicality is one of the easiest ways to learn the concept of agency. When you learn to understand your physical power, what it can do and how to control it, it's easier for you to learn to control yourself in general. And that lesson is transferable. And so Fight for Peace has been doing this for 20 years, but the research backs us up. People who participate in combat sports are less likely to get involved in acts of physical aggression because they learn to control it. And so I think part of how we educate young men is not just about protecting women, it's also about learning to control yourself. And as I was saying earlier, to recognize your own emotions, recognize those triggers that are setting you off, and to control them and find more constructive means of expressing those negative emotions. And we try to do that across the board with young people of both genders and all ages. I think, Dawn, part of the challenge is just making sure that there are safe spaces to do that. And conversations are part of them, but Noel talked about just the lack of services, and Michelle talked about the difficulty in accessing the few services that there are. I think that's one of the reasons that, as I said, we believe in this networked approach, because you can't try to solve piece of the problem, right? And we're a little NGO, so we work on piece of the problem. But if we want real change, we need all different partners working on all aspects of the challenge, so that people who recognize they have an issue and want to behave differently can get the support that they need. People who are being victimized and recognize that this isn't the norm, this isn't how I'm supposed to be treated, this isn't what love is supposed to feel like, can have a way to step out of that. Until we have that networked approach and connected services, even when you recognize there's a problem, it's difficult to move towards the solution.
Yeah, and I so appreciate that, Kellie. We're recently seeing, and I'm a firm believer, everything happens for a reason. And we recently see a video circulating with a member of parliament, attacking a woman or beating a woman. And I know quite a few ministers have spoken out about it. And I think it's going to change. Change has to come. And maybe that's a turning point for us in Jamaica, where we're paying attention to what abuse looks like against women, and changing the laws to protect our women and children more, having more resources, what you've mentioned. 1 second, Shauna, just having more resources for women to go to with their children to feel comfortable in, and that we're certainly lacking. Yes, Shauna?
John, we could be talking from now until 100 years, but what is the root cause? Why are these men or these boys who turn into men, why do they abuse women? What is the root cause? Because it has to be something that stems from childhood, or it has to be something that stems from the environment that they raised in. What is causing this?
So you answer that, Shauna.
No, we have so many women here. We have Anthony Cruz here. We have Noel in here.
So you're posing that question to the men.
Yeah. What is causing all of this root problem? Because men also get abused. But what I personally think, especially in our society here in Jamaica, I don't think our boys get enough love. I'm gonna be very straight up, because down in the inner city, you'll see the women, the mothers would beat the boys with the slippers. You are no good for nothing, and all of these things. And I'm saying, some of these things can also stem from, these guys grow up and become an abuser. Go ahead, Anthony.
Anthony's muted. You're muted, Anthony.
Noel, answer the question.
All right. So for me, like recently, I've been using a hashtag in defense of men. And most females don't like to see it. But personally, for my personality, I don't care, really and truly. Because I don't think anyone is on our side. That's how I feel.
Absolutely. I feel that way too.
I observe and I bond them out. Some Jamaican feminists and some Jamaican speakers. And when they're talking, it's always they're woman, what do they call themselves? But it's always about putting down men. I am big on education. And when I think about education, I'm not talking about degree, masters, and PhD, which Jamaica push for. I'm talking about simple stuff, street smart, values and attitude, how to develop respect and manners and stuff like that. And these are foundation. And if we in a society now we keep putting down men out, how can we get change?
Exactly.
And I know in our cancer culture, and we cancel a person here. How can we get this person to be fixed and we can move forward? And boys, as you said, and I'm happy you said it, we don't get the love and the respect. And I tell people all the time, we're trying to fight for equality. We will never live to see equality. What we need to fight for is respect. You respect me and I respect you. But we will never be equal.
So Noel, I agree with you. I do want to say that. So we are definitely on the side of men and boys. Our program is 50% is 50% male, and because we focus on youth violence prevention, we look at the numbers, and if you are a young man aged 15 to 24, you are 4 to 5 more times likely to be a victim of a homicide or a victim of assault than a woman. So I hear you, but I will say though that talking about gender-based violence and talking about violence against women is not putting men down. Right, that's not what we're talking about. We don't want to run the risk of all lives mattering this issue, right? Because violence, I think what we have to realize though, Noel, and it's an important point, and I'm glad you raised it, is that violence is a problem. I think as Shauna has, I'm about to get a t-shirt for Shauna that says look at the root causes, because I think she's right. Violence is a general problem. We need to look at the root causes, but we also need to realize that violence shows up differently for men and women. The risks are different, the patterns are different, and we can't take a one-size-fits-all approach to it. And just because we're talking about one side of the issue on one day doesn't mean that we're not paying attention to the other side of the issue. We advocate very often about making sure that young men from our communities are not only discussed as perpetrators or allies. We need to, people need to be outraged when a 19-year-old from Denham Town is killed, a 19-year-old boy from Denham Town is killed. That we should be outraged by that, right? But we do have a real problem with violence against women, and I think the fact that there is attention given to it, we need to be careful in maintaining the attention given to the serious issue of violence against women and children, while also making sure that we don't exacerbate the general problem of violence against men and boys. And sometimes it's, I said it to Don at the start of the show. One of the things that really upsets me is when advocates and allies sort of start turn it into a turf war. So no, I'm only here to talk about violence against women. I'm not here to talk about the issues. That's not helpful, right? We don't live in a world that's very neatly divided by boundaries like that. A lot of these problems are integrated. A lot of it goes back to the same root causes, as my friend Shauna keeps saying. And I think we need to take that holistic is a $10 word that people are tired of hearing. But we really do need to take a holistic approach in looking at these issues to make sure that we don't solve one problem while making another one worse.
And I want to take a couple questions or comments from the viewers as well. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Dr. Miriam Lisa, who is currently in Jamaica, says not enough support, intervention, or education on the island. And I think we mentioned education as well. And one of the things that I recommend a lot of country leaders do is look at the countries that are doing well. I'm going to mute everyone because we're getting some echo in here. But look at countries that are doing well, like Finland. They're very, very focused on their education system. They are also, all their teachers have like a master's degree, and they weren't always in the position they are as a country, but they've seen their crime and everything else go down based on just education and making sure no one's left behind. So I think those are some of the things that will really help us in Jamaica and around the world is making sure our kids have, I know Kellie that mentioned sports and different outlets as well for children to grow up in. I'm a firm believer having kids that are involved in sports, how healthy and important that is for them. Mish McLean, thanks for joining. She says, I don't think we heal. We just find other things to distract those pains. So that's so true, Michelle. We find other ways to live beyond our personal pain and journey. She says, during these times like this, support is a must, having the strength to leave. And it's like, where do these women or men that need help go to, or the children that need help? So, and those are the things that as a country we need to think about. Anthony, I think you had something to say to us. We have to unmute you first though, Anthony.
Okay, yeah, you hear me now? Yeah, man. I mean, I said, come to think of it, we have to throw some light on the slave master, because they was beat the hell out of our ancestor, them, You understand? Enough of the things that we will learn coming from that side also, whipping a lot of slaves and all of them things. So them thing the abuse coming up to where people, take it for a part of them culture and feel like say, I saw it go, So but that's some I blame over this too, on them,
I'm with you a little, Anthony.
Yes, for the whole heap.
But can we continue to blame our forefathers for that behavior?
No, we have to evolve. We have to evolve. It's the 21st century now.
Yeah.
A little.
A lot, Shauna. I mean, my dad for me had no excuse but to break the cycle. If you love your kids, you do not raise your hands. You do not beat them in that way. You do not beat women in that way. And so mentally, we have to fix ourselves. I can't tell you why my dad's girlfriend kept going back to him, because that's not love. You have to love yourself enough to walk away. As a child, I couldn't walk away. Those were my parents. But I eventually ran away to my grandparents. And I got beatings from my grandparents. Don't get me wrong. There's a difference between a beating and child abuse, when your kids are living in mental fear. So I can't agree that we can continue to blame our forefathers, even though I know Jamaica has a dark history of slavery. But when does it end? When does a man stop saying, I'm going to blame my forefathers for it? So I'm glad you raised it, Anthony.
But now I really blame them, but may I say, you see a lot of things that we learn, a lot of things that we learn were taught to us by other people from other culture, and when I say we blame them, but as I say, a lot of that comes from that too, because a lot of things that we practice are what we see, are what we go through in life, So when I
not everything that your parents did to you, if you decipher it's not healthy or not good, you choose not to pass that on to your kids, so that they have a better journey in life on how to treat and respect someone else.
True.
So Dawn, touching on parents, our program, we haven't spoken about it, but we emphasize working with the parents of our young people. And the reason we emphasize working with parents is that they have their own histories. They have their own schemas, their own perspectives. And the pandemic has given us kind of a really good opportunity to really connect with a lot more parents, because they're home. And so they're more likely to answer the phone, more likely to interact. And if it's one thing that has struck me over the last year, is how many parents at the end of a difficult conversation will say, thank you, I've never had someone listen to my story. So we have to acknowledge that everybody has their history. Everybody has their own experiences. And when you're working with parents and trying to help them gain accountability, it's allowing them to tell their story, because their parenting style has a story behind it. There's no parenting manual. So part of getting to the root cause, as Shauna said, is actually listening to person's personal stories. There may be similarities, but there may also be differences. So it's not one size fits all. And unfortunately, it's not one simple cause to this big systemic overarching problem.
And Anthony said at the start of the conversation that this is about changing what people say is Jamaican culture, right? Some things just get, labeled, it's Jamaican culture. And a big part of that is just conversations, from neighbor to neighbor, peer to peer. Very early on in our work with parents, we had some parents tell us that they would go to parenting workshops and they learn new strategies. And then they're trying them at home, and then the neighbors would make fun of them. So you don't want to, your child is acting up and you want to do this new technique that you learn in the workshop, and your neighbor is laughing at you over the fence and saying you're an idiot. It takes more reinforcement, more conversations, more people saying, okay, I'll try it too. More people sharing their stories, to change what becomes normal, to change what becomes sort of accepted practice. There's a program, that a national program called the CSJP, the Community Safety and Justice Program, that ended up last year. And one of the key lessons that they had out of their parenting intervention was parents who had been physically abusive to their children, who then adopted new practices, sharing what their relationships with their children were like. And one of them in particular, in my entire life, I've never seen anything so effective. This was a woman who used to, beat the living hell out of her child, and both the mother and the daughter were on the panel, and they were talking about how their relationship had changed, and that you could see it in the room, that mother and daughter sharing that story, sorry Michelle, but is 10 times more effective than any workshop Michelle could lead on how to parent. Somebody who has been the worst of the worst, saying, you know what, I changed, and this is how my relationship with my child changed. You could see it, you could almost see it rippling through the room. And so I'm a firm believer in the power of storytelling, Dawn, as you know. I believe stories have power. I believe in our culture, it resonates with us in a way more than didactic instruction can. And I feel like we need more of that. We need more people sharing their stories, not more of the quote unquote bad guys sharing what they have learned and how it changed their lives and how it changed their children's lives, so that other people can see the potential for them in trying some of these new ways.
I so agree. We learn so much from each other in sharing our journeys and stories, and you can only help other people by doing so. So well said, Kellie, hence why we do this show, and we invite more people to come on and have these conversations, because as we're wrapping up, we're just touching the surface of the conversation. So more to continue. I did see one other comment that I'm trying to find. So Dr. Miriam Lisa says, how much are we as women playing into this? Mothers, why are our boys growing up to hate us? And I don't know, that's a really strong, if our sons are growing up to hate us. So maybe we need to have more on that conversation another time, Dr. Lisa, because that certainly is concerning.
Yeah, Dr. Herbert Gale at UA has done some really interesting research at the link between, I think, corporal punishment at the hands of mothers and the likelihood of ending up in violent crime. And so I think it's something that really needs more ventilation. How we parent, how mothers treat with, how parents treat with their children, and the trauma that can cause. What happens to that if it doesn't get expressed and there isn't an opportunity for healing, I think is really important to look at.
Yeah, so much we can learn from each other in this world through conversation. I like conversations. I like it to keep going on. I think we learn so much from people that have changed, like the story you just told us about Kellie, just a mother and daughter sitting there and saying how a lot of resources or tools they may have used, or different people's situations that made their life so much better once they put those into practice. I can't thank you and Michelle enough for every single thing you're doing with our youth. I think that's where it starts, and in the home, like Anthony said, of us parenting, and Noel as well, and Shauna. So I'm just going to go around the room and you guys tell me anything you want to from this conversation, anything you want the viewers to know. So we'll start with, let's see, Shauna.
John, you know what I'm here actually thinking? We keep saying so many things, but we see our crime rate, we see violence against children, women, violence against men. And I say the root cause. So why not make it a part of the curriculum into school? We're going to be talking about the primary school. We have the guidance council. We're talking about violence, because you will see a lot of violence in schools. Why not have a special curriculum? The speech is about violence against and how to prevent it, how to deal with stress, stress at home, children, having stress, the parents having stress. And I think a curriculum in the education system would actually do some justice.
Well, I'll just respond to that and then give my 2 cents. So we do have a curriculum. It's called the Health and Family Life Education Curriculum, and it runs every grade from preschool through 12th grade. And it includes conflict resolution, mediation, violence prevention.
Oh, when was that?
How
When
it's
was
been
that?
around for at least the last, I don't know, 7 or 8 years, Michelle. But it's yeah, it's been highly recognized across the Caribbean for the comprehensiveness of it. How well it gets implemented in each school in the island is another story, Dawn. I don't know, maybe you can have some of the people from the ministry on, but I think the ministry has taken a really aggressive approach at trying to distill those essential life skills and integrate them into the curriculum. There's a lot more opportunity in terms of making sure that those points get reinforced in other interactions. I think sometimes we overestimate the potential of treating with every problem, every societal problem by putting it into the curriculum. Our teachers have a really hard time as it is, but I just want to be positive. It is there. I think there's a lot more that we can do to support its integration into other aspects of
But why are we seeing the result? Why is the murder rate here in Jamaica so high? Why
So
everybody
I
so
think that has
violent
to
against
do with the
women?
weakness of the other protective factors, and I think school alone can't be the solution. So I think we need to look at what are those other protective factors, what are some of the other systemic weaknesses Michelle was talking about, and make sure that those are addressed. I did want to just say one positive thing to counter something Noel said earlier, and to show you, Noel, that I really am team boys and men. Presence of fathers in the home is higher than it's ever been in Jamaica. So it might seem like a small point, but I think as Dawn and I were saying earlier, narratives matter, stories matter. There is this narrative that Jamaican fathers are absent and they're not doing enough for their kids, and I'm by no means saying it's perfect, but the fact is that Jamaican fathers are more present in their children's homes and in their lives than they have been at any other time in our history. So that's I want to end on that positive note and shout out to the dads who are doing their damnedest and trying to raise boys and girls who can counter these negative cycles.
Thank you, Kellie. Good point. I didn't know that either. So great point. Yeah. How about you, Michelle?
Well, I also want to be positive in that we need to celebrate the small wins. They may seem small, but the truth is, you have to celebrate the small wins to get to the big reward. You have to. But I'll also say that I think we have to continue emphasizing how we work in our program is a collective impact. You have to work together. So it has to be the school, it has to be the home, it has to be the broader community. Like one of the trainings I do, or the main training I do, emphasizes this thing called a community of care, where it's the family, it's a community, it's a professional, it's a public sector, it's a private sector. We all just have to work together to tackle this problem.
Thank you. Totally agree. It's not one cookie cutter, right? Absolutely not. And how about you, Anthony?
Well, maybe just continue to go and write the songs and we can educate our young children and our big men them too, and women too, because I have a couple of songs on YouTube and I think I have to have about 2 of them, talking about domestic violence and what you should do and all of that stuff. So you can check that out also. But as I said, we just go and see best we can educate the nation as the life journey goes along, and see how much them will, accept what we have to share through the music.
Yes. And once again, thanks for being vulnerable this evening and sharing your personal experience with it. I mean, so heartfelt. And yes, music is key, which is something we haven't touched on, but we know a lot of our music influences our mind, and music is strong and loved in our country. So yes, we look forward to hearing it. The more music with the positive vibes. So thank you. We'll stay tuned to you, Anthony. Looking forward to that. Maybe you can bust a tune for Caribbean Edge in that positive vibes.
Yes,
Noel, last but not least.
Alrighty, so like for me now, all I'm saying is that we just need to create an environment of openness. And as you said a bit earlier, you're asking about what are the causes, you know, men killing these women. And it also touched on culture wherein, you know, as the man can't express himself because you always say, oh, the woman near me up because, and then, you know, as Michelle was saying earlier about nicknames and stuff like that, and the trauma go on. So people react, you know, differently. And then Michelle was also saying about the different agencies and community and coming together. And I believe we also need to start, communities are the backbone of the country. And we also need to start building back community and groups and getting everyone active. And this way we can reach everyone and we can have organization like what Kellie or, you know, Kellie and Michelle involved in to come on in these groups and we can start educate and identify some of these problems. So if we want to tackle these stuff, we need to get my communities up and running with groups, get everyone active. And if we have them active, then we'll lessen the crime and lessen the abuse and stuff like that. And, you know, things like that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I thank you all for joining me tonight. I thank the viewers for your comments and for sharing tonight's video. The conversation has just begun. I'm actually, you know, listening to Michelle and Kellie. I want to come to Jamaica and team up with you guys as soon as COVID is finished, because my passion is with the kids. And I think, you know, like everyone said tonight, the community, the kids, the education, the recognition, the support systems in place, the parents. And for me, based on my personal journey, it's that personal accountability that you want to change, that you want to stop hurting your children and your loved one. And it begins with yourself. So have a great night. And thanks for tuning into the Caribbean Edge. One love, everyone.
Thank you, Dawn. Thanks,
Yeah.
everybody.
Thanks, everybody.